Hi everyone, my name is Sally Fowler. I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage. This is attempt number 2 of teaching my second dog, Austin, how to use a ramp. In this video, I'll be showing 3 different clips and doing voiceover for each one. The first clip is the next day after I tried using the leash method and it didn't work. The second clip is later that same day inside with our training table. And the third clip is a month later after continuous work with Austin. So I have the same setup here. The ramp is on our firewood trailer so that there's plenty of space to work with. But this time I have treats in one hand to help guide Austin's nose up the ramp and hope that the rest of his body follows. I'm using a shorter leash this time, and you can see he's already a little bit more interested in the ramp. We're going slower, which seems to help him more. And he's being rewarded for putting even just one paw in the ramp and taking a few steps. There, he didn't get a reward because he jumped at the very end, which I don't want to encourage. Here, I'm limited. I really need 3 hands, but I don't have 3 hands. The reason I needed 3 hands was that it would have been nice to have one arm over his hips to help guide him as he came down the ramp, as I did in the earlier video. Here, I'm actually having to hold him back a little bit, which was weird because he was going for the ramp too fast. He was getting really excited about the food. So I hold him back so that I can treat at the appropriate times and then lure him forward, encouraging him with good, 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 which is praise bridging, and then also getting a treat once he is actually up on the ramp properly, or up on the trailer properly. And there he's willing to start going down the ramp before I even ask for it, which is awesome. That was really good progress. And you can see in this video, as opposed to the video before, in this video, he's a little bit more engaged. He's fighting less. He's consistently stepping on the ramp and trying to navigate using his hind end, which is really good. In the previous video, it was just a ton of confusion. Now, this is how training goes. The first attempt is sometimes really rough and it does not look pretty. And one of the reasons it got better was because I switched up my method to better suit Austin. But there are plenty of other times where I've done the leash method with Austin on other things, like teaching him to walk through a small kiddie pool of water. And using the leash method took a lot of time and a lot of patience, but we got through it and we didn't have to resort to using treats. I'm not a huge fan of using treats for a lot of reasons, but with Austin in particular, he was very mouthy right from the beginning. And using treats with him, he didn't take them gently. It hurt my hands to hold them. It was weird. He mouthed on me a lot, and it caused a lot of extra flares. But it turned out to be the best option for him. As you can see, he's done the ramp several times now. He's getting a lot more confident, a lot more steady with it. And he's not showing as many of the frustration signals that he was the previous day of trying to lay on the ramp or biting various things, which was really awesome. So this next clip is done later in the same day, but I moved the ramp inside our house to use with our training table. And it's perched a little bit more precariously, but this was the best we could do. And I'm still keeping him on the right side of my body so that it stays consistent for how it is for getting on the table, the trailer, and into our truck one day. And you can see he's already really excited and rushing a little bit, but I use the treats to encourage him to keep moving his nose forward. And there he leans back and starts resisting, which gets a little harder even with the treats. And one reason he's leaning back, the main reason he's leaning back is that the ramp was unsteady, so it was wobbling. Whereas when it was hooked up on the trailer, it wasn't wobbling because there was a nice little ledge that the ramp sat in. But on the table, it was just there by pure hope. So he's a lot more resistant. He's all for putting his front feet up, but he's just not quite sure about those back feet. And here he's actually leaning back quite a lot, and I almost fall over there because he's resisting so much. And there I used my leg to try and correct him for falling down my body, for lack of a better way to describe that. But with consistent leash pressure and a treat lure, he does manage to get on the ramp. So it ends up being that once we're inside the house, I have to combine both treat luring and the leash method in order to have success with him. And there I just needed to take a minute. That was extremely painful. So here I'm able to guide him a little bit down the ramp, which seems to help him. I experimented some with holding a treat in the same hand as my leash, which takes a little bit of extra doing, but it can be a way to free up an arm. So there he's getting a lot of encouragement and reward for a job well done. And we're going to come back and try it again. Right now I'm just breaking up my treats so they're in smaller pieces. And so you can tell immediately he's still willing to put his front feet up, which is great, but he's already rocking back on those hind feet trying to resist or see how far he can crawl up without actually going up. And there his front end are up. And he's sort of on the table, but he's so big. This was a recurring problem. He could get his front end on the table without his back end having to do any work. But there he did climb up the ramp, and so he got his reward. And for coming back down, he's really resistant. He lays down, he pulls backwards some, and so I have to combine both the leash and one arm over his back to kind of help reassure him as he's moving. And we go right back to it. We don't take a longer break this time. He's really resisting because the ramp is wobbling, but I just keep applying forward leash pressure. And then I do end up resetting because he was mostly off the ramp and he was falling into me. And sometimes you just gotta reset, and that's okay. So I shorten my leash up some to help encourage him better, which works a lot better. If you're trying to use leash pressure and it's not working well, you might look at how long your leash is and how far you're trying to stretch your arm out. Sometimes it'll help you to shorten your leash up so that you're not having to reach your arm way out into the distance to encourage your dog. And I called it for that day. And this continued. We continued working on this every single day, but we usually only did it about 3 to 5 times in a day before we went and did something else. And part of that was because he got frustrated. And the other part of that was because when he fought really hard for going up this ramp, inside he was able to trigger a lot of really bad pain flares for me because he would lean back so much that it exhausted my arm, convincing him to keep moving forward. And he only leaned back for a few seconds at a time. But by this point, he, like I said in the previous video, was 76 pounds leaning backwards on my arm that had nerve damage and then falling off the ramp against my body and using me as a pillar to push against while he was fighting going up the ramp. And it was exhausting. And so it had to be broken into smaller pieces. In this next clip, you're going to see a month later the progress that we were able to make. So here I've got the camera set up at a slightly different angle so you can see a different perspective on how I was doing this, but I still have a leash with him and I'm still using a treat lure. He's much more engaged with me. Let's see here. He avoids the ramp completely, charges up at it, and jumps over it, which actually both of my dogs did. So I needed to move a little bit slower the next time. There he did a little bit better, still some hopping, but you can tell there's a lot less resistance. He's much more willing to use the ramp, especially going down it, and he's barely putting any tension on the leash whatsoever, which was really great progress. So when you're teaching your dog to use a ramp, you want to be willing to play around with how you're teaching them to use the ramp. And then you also want to look at the ramp that you're using. This ramp, neither of our dogs really like it. We think having such high ridges made it feel more like a ladder to them, and it also made it a lot easier for them to lean backwards and resist it. We also think the slits in between the boards vertically created a weird hole that, especially my first dog, his paws would slide through it, and that seemed to make him kind of uncomfortable, understandably. And the other thing you want to look at is how long it is. So the shorter your ramp, the steeper the angle's going to be, and the more it's going to feel for your dog like they're falling backwards. And so their reaction to that is either going to be to lay down or to lean backwards more to try and avoid it. And so when you're building your ramp, you want to look at low ridges, because you do want to provide some measure of stability, but you want to look at low ridges and grip tape, or a combination, or one or the other. And then you also want to look at the size of your dog and the angle, the height, the things that you're trying to use the ramp with. You might need to use a longer ramp so that the incline angle is not quite as steep. The steeper it is, the harder it's going to be for your dog. Additionally, if your dog is already really, really big, it might be better to immediately opt for treat luring or using a kibble trail along with a leash to help guide them, as opposed to jumping straight into a leash method with no type of treat luring, as I mistakenly did. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please reach out.